Industry Night podcast, where we take an unfiltered look at the events industry and what goes on behind the scenes. First things first, I think we should kind of have a little bit of a conversation around who we are and why we're doing the podcast. So Matthias, from your perspective, you give a little bit of an intro and what motivated you to get involved in the podcast.
So DJ Fresh Seas, Matthias. I've been a DJ for, I'm getting close to 20 years. Sounds crazy to say.
That's how I met you.
Yeah, right. We met as DJs, and I guess the journey just started in the club industry, and slowly it led on to weddings, so on and so forth. We ended up here, just kind of me and you is a personal connection, but me and Paul through the industry. I think I do this because I love my craft, right? So for me, that's my why.
Yeah, and I think, just to piggyback on not just your why, but why should people care about having you on the podcast? You're an award-winning DJ, right? So you've got a reputation that precedes you.
Yeah.
DJ of the Year for London, Ontario, this year through DJ Alpha Productions.
Yeah.
All right. So congrats.
Thank you very much.
To you on that. But I think that also kind of allows our guests that are going to be coming on to be able to ask you questions about the DJ industry, and you be able to provide some kind of value added insight. But it also, allows us to have a great reach in terms of people that you've been able to work with over the last 20 years to bring onto the podcast and give them that platform. Right?
I guess for me, my biggest achievement is actually not necessarily the awards that I won, because the DJing is the easy part. But my proudest achievement is that with all the couples that I work with, I have a 71%, how do I say this, with Google reviews. So 71% of my couples will review me on Google saying, this guy did a great job, he was amazing. And for me, it took me a while to get my method down, but now I've got it down, because what I've understood now is making the experience enjoyable for the client, right? Because it's all about the client. It's not about me, actually. Like, I'm a servant of the client. It's a service industry, right? So if you know how to serve your customers, then they're gonna always recommend you. Right. And for me, that's my proudest achievement, and I guess that keeps me motivated, right? Because you're making people happy, and it makes me happy because it's what I love to do.
You're talking specifically about weddings. What else do you play?
I play a lot of clubs. I used to actually tour quite a bit with Casper the Ghost. Shout out to Casper. Doing concerts. Actually, I feel like I grew up in music hall. Lots of crazy stories there. But I think being a club DJ is actually what made me a better wedding DJ, because I learned how to crowd read. Although I will say, reading a crowd in a wedding is a little bit, it's a different challenge, because there's a wider age range and wider range of demographic in there. But that club experience really helped me get to the point that I'm at now.
Yeah, and to be clear, 71% conversion rate on people going on and actually giving you a review, and not your ranked 71%.
Yes.
Okay, all right, good.
If you could play one genre, what would it be?
Dancehall.
Awesome. What about you?
Yeah, so I'm not going to kind of bore everybody with my whole background, but I've been in the events industry. I'm a baby in the events industry. I've only been in the industry for just over a year now. Run a mobile bar business. But what I think motivated me to get involved in the podcast, and maybe this is a good opportunity to kind of talk about how the podcast even came together. So originally the idea was to do strictly a mobile bar kind of based podcast, start to get some people involved in that industry, talking, and then eventually become somewhat of an authority in the space, just because we're one of the only ones doing it in Canada, at least. But as I started kind of talking to Matthias about the idea, and then eventually we pulled you in, Paul, it became clear that there was really a need for a platform where we could discuss the events industry as a whole, and give each other a platform to kind of learn about the other vendors and the other folks in the events industry, but then also network with vendors that we know about, but we don't get to kind of talk to very often, because at events they're so busy, right?
So, you meet so many people, but it's so quick, right? Because everybody's working. But there's a lot of good people that in the industry, and I want to get to know them more, and I'd love to hear where they're from, how they got to where they are currently, and learn as a collective.
One of the things that I'm curious to ask you about actually is you've done a really great job at getting your followers engaged in your content. Like, can you kind of talk to us about your method in doing that? You've done a really great job with your social media marketing.
Yeah, I think for me it was early on. I just decided that I wanted to be consistent with being in front of the client base. So it was posting regularly and being in front of the client. Then over time, as I learned from others in the industry, and especially others in the events industry, which we'll definitely be talking to some folks as part of this podcast that have a really strong marketing background that will be able to ask them some really cool questions. But for me, I kind of learned that getting yourself in front of the camera is really uncomfortable, but it's really great at getting people to engage with your content because you're showing your story and you're showing a level of vulnerability.
People want to see it.
Yeah, you're showing a level of vulnerability around not just kind of like I said, the filtered part of Instagram and Facebook, but the unfiltered part where you're saying, fuck, I got a flat tire on my rig, or, like something didn't go the way you expected it, and sharing that with your customers. There's something powerful about that. And I think that is one of the keys to, unlocking some good engagement in social media.
Life isn't perfect.
No, it's not.
Being unperfect is relatable.
Yes,
for sure.
Absolutely.
For sure. So, one of the other motivating kind of factors for this podcast for me is, for our business, one of our core values is support local. And I think this is also just a great way for us to do that, right? To bring local businesses in the events industry that maybe people haven't heard of, that can talk about it in a little bit of a longer format. How they got involved, what were their wins, their losses, and their learns. And then hopefully that gives them, opportunity to share a little bit about their business and what they do as well. So
that's great.
I want to hear about your business though, because you still got to say what you actually do in the events industry.
Yeah, so I said I ran a mobile bar, so I kind of skirted over that. So yeah, in the events industry, we're kind of a niche where we're mobile caterers of alcoholic beverages, as a fancy way to say mobile bar. So we have a horse trailer that we've converted to a bar. It's kind of our more elite level rental. We've also got a tap truck, so a 1930 style truck that we've converted to a rolling bar. And then also, we've got services that we can do indoors as well. So essentially it's bartending, but to the word you used, experience, we're really in the experiential marketing business. So we're giving the customer an experience that is memorable with fancy drinks and a fancy setup that they can remember for a long time.
Nice.
On to you, big guy.
Owner of PM Creative Studios. We are a full service video production and photography business based out of London, Ontario. We dabble in everything from weddings to commercial projects and real estate. And this has been a rather recent endeavor, I guess, almost 4 years now. And it started because I got laid off from my marketing job during COVID, and I was sitting at home bored as hell, and I had a drone. So I picked up my drone, I was flying it around, and I said, I got to make this my job. I need to make some kind of money. Might as well figure it out with this. And got to work, literally sat there the first year just learning everything I could possibly read, watch, talk to people, tried to figure it out. And now it's a full-time business. I'm part of it. My wife is, and we're looking to hire somebody now as a full-time video editor. So things have grown, and we're excited to see where it goes.
Curious to know, in your industry, there's a ton of courses that are being constantly put out every day.
I know you're dabbling in learning some video and photography, and
but
let me tell you,
serious.
There have been a handful of things that I watched. I thought I was doing the wrong way, kept saying to myself, why is this not working? And realized I'm doing it wrong. There's so much wrong information flooding YouTube. It's a great place to learn if you look at the right courses or influencers or whatever. There's a lot of influencers who don't know what they're talking about, unfortunately. So you really have to be careful as to what you watch, because there's a lot of misleading information. And I had to learn it the hard way. And luckily I did, because now I know what to do, but it's a lot to take in for sure. YouTube University is fantastic. However, it can be a bit of a
absolutely
crazy
black
roadmap.
hole.
Yeah, for sure.
So, I think it's...
If I can say one thing, it's invest in an actual course that's reviewed and recommended by people.
Right.
Because if you pay for it, even if it's, a few $100, anything, if it's got good reviews and it's well known by people, at least you know the right direction to go into, and you can continue your journey from that point, knowing the fundamentals.
Where would somebody find that? Like, how would you know that it's, I guess, because they all put reviews on there. They all have like the, whatever that section is, testimonials.
Buy a book. Usually if you can find a book on it, it's rather decent. Start there. How about that?
So I think it's important, as our first podcast, to kind of share with whoever's listening, why should you listen to the other episodes, right? Like, what are you going to get out of this? And for me, I think one of the important things to convey is that, there are other podcasts that are based on the events industry, but a lot of them are either, really scripted and more educational, where they're like focusing on specific topics in a certain industry. And less of them are kind of conversational and around the ups and downs of all the various vendors in the event space that create this really cool ecosystem, right? Like when you think about events vendors, your mind goes to videography, photography, your mind goes to like catering and the bar and DJs, but there's so many other vendors, right? Like there's decoration vendors now that are like really playing a huge role in the events industry. There's live music, live performance, right? There's content creators, but there's subsets of like photography and videography that exist, people that specialize in like only certain things and they build a niche out of it. So there's a lot of really cool guests that we're going to be bringing on.
Some of which are invested in the wedding industry quite heavily, as all of us are.
Sure. Yeah.
However, we do branch out to other sections in the events industry as a whole. Yeah. However, all that knowledge applies to running a business if you're in the wedding business, if you're in other places with events. It's all very good information.
I think too, what's going to be great is in future, once we get on to our other seasons too, it'd be great to hear from some of the fans, or like, what other vendors they'd like for us to have on the pod, or what kind of content we should put on there. Like, it'd be great to kind of hear just for...
Oh yeah, we're totally open
to keep
engaging with the client, with our viewers, and seeing what they're interested in. Let us know what podcast you like the most. And we're all ears here and trying to go in the direction you guys want to go in.
Yeah, 100%. And that's why we chose kind of events unveiled as the tagline of the podcast, and not like weddings unveiled specifically, because there are tons of different types of events too, right? Like you're talking about the beer fests that are out there and the food and wine show. There's so many vendors that are part of those types of events that are intricately linked to what we do. And at the end of the day, you nailed it. Paul, this is really about entrepreneurship. It's about people that have stuck their neck out there and said, I've got an idea on how this can be profitable. It's going to take a ton of work, because everything in the events industry is a ton of like sweat equity. And a lot of people have been really successful. So a cool thing for us to be able to unpack with these people that we're bringing on is, what was your formula for success in your given niche, and some are going to be further along in that journey and be able to share kind of their formula for success with us, and others are going to be in kind of similar spots to maybe you and I, Paul, where we're in our first 5 years, where we're still trying to figure it out, right? So there's going to be a lot of like learning both ways. The other thing I didn't kind of mention in my intro is, I've got 20 years of corporate experience, right? So, I've got masters in business, so I bring all of that as baggage into these conversations, right? So, hopefully that will help us unpack, some strategic elements of running a business and, scaling a business, and, what are some of the ways to minimize risk, maximize profitability. and infuse that into the conversations we're going to have. And to go back to what is one of my motivators, that is one of my motivators, right? If I can, provide a nugget of help to somebody, then, for me, that's a win, right? So we're not looking to get, I know you use the word fans. We're not looking to get like hundreds or thousands of fans out of this, right?
I don't know how to say it.
Yeah.
I don't know what the right word is.
Yeah, I know, right?
But hey,
viewers.
yeah.
I mean, just people watching,
Viewers.
listeners.
Yeah.
We just want people
Don't
to
be sensitive.
all
Don't be sensitive.
Yeah. Only fans.
only the fans.
Yeah. So, and it's going to get a little bit unscripted in the sense that you're going to hear the true colors out of all of us. It's uncensored, unfiltered. We're going to go deep on a lot of
Not only business, but like philosophical
I think so,
conversations
yeah.
about
Yeah.
mindset and why people made the decisions they made.
yeah. I think
Very interesting. I think.
like one of the topics that I think we're going to dive into this year, because it's definitely a question I want to ask some of the guests that are coming onto the podcast is, what has been in the events industry, people's relationship with alcohol? Because that is something that, as a mobile bar provider, I have my own thoughts on, but as a DJ, that's club culture, right? Yeah. So, how do you navigate that? And we've got some folks that have been in that industry that are going to be on the podcast this season, that I'm interested to kind of dive into those questions. So those are the types of things that you're going to hear about on the podcast this season and in upcoming seasons. So stay tuned for that.
One final question.
Yeah.
What is it?
What is it?
I wanted to add on to what you said too about that. I think a lot of the guests that we brought on, some of them have this mystique when you see them from afar, when they do what they do, because they're so good at it, you often don't get a chance to actually be like, hey, like, what was this like? And what was this about? Right. And I think for me, what I really gained was like, these are real people, and it provides good motivation, hopefully to some of the viewers too, that like, you can do it too. I mean,
Everyone
if you're sitting
starts
behind
somewhere.
the screen, exactly, you can
They're
do
just
it
people.
too.
Yeah. Everyone
Yeah.
starts somewhere, and everyone has, their own story to share and tell, and hopefully there's some learning along the way that we can get. So so one final question would be, going back to the opening line about unfiltered and Instagram, one of the things that we're inundated with all the time is buzzwords and these quotes that are trying to inspire us on socials. So my question for both of you is there a certain quote that you've heard either recently or earlier in life that has kind of stuck with you, or that you just find super inspirational, that you kind of always go back to kind of get you back on track?
Does 20 years count?
Yeah, it counts, man. Those are the best ones. If it stuck with you
It's
for 20
been for 20
Yeah,
years.
if it stuck with you for 20
And it's literally made me reconsider every part of my life, but it's find a job you love and you'll never work a day in your life.
Oh, that's a good one. Yeah.
And I've literally lived by it.
Yeah.
I look at people who are doing things they absolutely hate.
Yeah.
And you could see it in their face. And I said, I never want to be that person. And I saw that quote and I'm like, wow, that makes sense. You can literally see it in people's faces that they're not happy at their jobs. And I told myself, I do not want to be that person. And I've naturally been a creative person because I'm trying to find a job where you have to be creative, because I feel like that's how you flourish as a human.
Sure.
I do anyway.
Yeah.
So
Well, this isn't my quote, but this is one that I saw that I think is in the same vein, and I saw it recently, and I actually wrote it on my chalkboard upstairs that we're supposed to put our groceries on. So it's been up there for like a month now, and it's, if you don't take any risks, you'll work the rest of your life for someone who did.
yeah. I've heard that one.
Yeah,
I love that.
so it's kind of in the same vein,
yeah.
It's like, put yourself out there, do what you need to do to kind of be happy, right?
It's almost like some people, they work so hard towards something, and they give up right before that thing's going to happen.
The miner in the diamond fucking picture, right? Where like he
Yeah,
gives up, and then here comes the other guy. He just has to
Yeah.
knock one time, and there's all the diamonds.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's tough.
So what's your quote?
So I'm gonna fuck it up. Obviously, I'm gonna butcher my quote
Let's hear it.
because this quote is something for me that like has just stuck out in my later years. Has kind of helped me on how I should operate when I'm out there handling my business. It's I'm going to say it as best as I can, but basically what it says on the lower end of the totem pole, people compete in business. And the higher you get in the totem pole, people collaborate. And I've really started to see my mindset change when I'm out there working events, or if I'm DJing, I'm always looking to collaborate. Hey, how can I collaborate with that person? How can I collab with that person and that person? Because I think more hands makes the job easier, right? So it's easier to get to your goal or your...
Look at us go, boys.
Yeah, right?
Collaboration at its finest.
Exactly. And yeah, if you hear our story, that's exactly how it went. Yeah, collaboration.
Okay, so on that note, how do you feel about working with your competitors, or have you ever had an opportunity to work with your competitors? How do you work that in?
Yeah, definitely. For sure. And I think it happens a lot more often than people think it happens, you know what I mean? Because really and truly, when it comes to good vendors in the field, there's only so much bodies, right? So there's times when it could be an emergency and you need something covered, and you just pick up the phone and you call, hey, so-and-so, do you have someone available? And if they do, then yeah, that works out, you know what I mean? And part of that too is almost like, how do I say this? Like real recognize real. Good vendors know good vendors, right? So if you want to protect your image, if you're gonna have somebody back you that's not part of your team, you want to call the next best up, right? That's what I would do. Yeah. So eventually, I mean.
And if you pass that business on to people when you're not available, they'll always give it back to you as well, right?
Absolutely.
So that's where I was going with it, right? So do you do that as well? Like say like you get a customer that reaches out to you and you're booked. You won't just be like, hey, I'm booked. You'll actually refer them out to another competitor.
There's two different ways.
Yeah.
I partner with competitors, I guess you can call them, when I need extra shooters, I need editors. We're kind of all in a circle together where we know what our strengths are. Yeah. And when we need someone for a specific thing, we'll reach out to each other. Even gear rentals or something, right? If you need a certain piece of equipment. But on top of that, we go through a process with our clients where we try to get to know them so we know whether our services are right for that client. Because there's a lot of different types of videographers out there. So if I talk to someone and they need something specific that isn't my niche, I'll refer them to someone who could serve them way better than I can. Right. Yeah. So there's a lot of ways to collaborate with.
You're right, yeah. I think the experience that I've had in the mobile bar industry, at least, has been that the vendors, some vendors, try to kind of keep everything to themselves, right? And there's a lot more of that competitive nature because there's so few players in the industry. But what I've started doing is taking the same approach as you guys, right? Is reaching out to those that are traditional competitors and being like, hey, if I'm booked and I have a client, I don't want to leave them high and dry. I know you do good work. I've seen what you do. I'll send them your way. You do the same, right? Exactly. And that seems to have worked really well in terms of building that mutual respect and that symbiotic relationship. But then there's others like I don't know if it's the same in the food catering world, but in the mobile bar catering world that will absolutely, not give you an ounce of information about what they're doing, how they're doing it, and they like really kind of, they don't really care to collaborate, right? So,
there's plenty of fish in the sea, not just for dating, but for business as well.
True.
It's true. It's like
it is.
Like you said, the totem pole, right? Yeah. The higher you go up, the more collaboration you see everywhere.
Because people don't understand that, like, you make yourself more valuable by giving up information. When you're holding stuff in, it's like, okay, it's cool. You might have a few ideas of your own that like might be good, but then you're kind of shooting yourself in the foot because you're not putting yourself around other people. They hear like, hey, have you heard this method or this method or this method? It could be something as small as like, it makes you better, but by 1%. But that 1% is huge. Like it's massive, right? So.
And on this podcast, we're all about sharing. Yeah. That's why we're bringing guests on here who know a lot about their niche, and we're excited to dive into their story, the business behind it, and learn as much as we can.
Yeah.
All right. So we're going to keep it short here, guys, for our first pod. We've got a lot of these conversations that we're going to kind of unpack further. So, Paul, do you want to wrap us up?
Don't forget to like and subscribe if you like what you hear. Move on to the next episode and come on a journey with us to learn all about the events industry.
Later.